marketing, obviously, hopefully that's already on your mind because you're here. And if you want to tell us where you're joining from, we would love to hear that. And then if you could release yourself from one marketing activity for all of time, like magic fairy wand, you never have to do it again, but it is taken care of, what would that be? So just go ahead and let us know in the chat. So let us know where you're joining from if you're just coming in. And then let us know if you could release yourself from ever doing one marketing activity ever again, what would that be? Dina is coming in from North Carolina. Lovely. I was just thinking the other day about some time we spent there in Asheville with my family before the pandemic. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to get started in a couple of minutes as people are coming in and getting comfortable. Go ahead and let us know where you're joining from. And then also let us know if you could excuse yourself, you get a hall pass from ever doing one particular marketing activity ever again. What would that be? What would you release? What would you let go of? What would you take the hall pass on?
Are we allowed to participate in the question?
Yeah, of course.
I would be gladly to never again write like a campaign email. You know, that promo copy.
Mm-hmm.
My least favorite thing to do.
Yeah, that can definitely weigh you down. Yeah.
How about you? I mean, we're marketers. Yeah. What
do you think, Jen?
Yeah. So my background is in PR, and I never want again to do the element of where I have to call reporters, beg them to, not beg, but convince them to cover my clients. The dreaded phone call. I just remember, you know, when I worked in an agency, like sitting in a room, a quiet room, and just going down the list and calling, follow up, like, please cover my client. And you get hung up on a lot. It's probably very similar to cold calling for sales.
Yikes.
So I would never do that part of marketing again.
While you're telling that story, my stomach went into knots because I had the same experience. Oh, that's a good one. Oh. All right, we have some answers in this. Looks like
we do.
What do we got, Kat?
Let's see. Mike O'Krent says, I'd love to never ever have to build an email list again. And Anne says, I would eliminate the need to market because people would automatically know what I do and why and will flood forward with work for me.
Yay!
Deanna says, I think the time it takes for me to decide how to manage the marketing activities, which platforms to use, deciding the best way to spend my time.
Oh, yes.
So much. Samantha says, I'm joining from right outside of Boise. I'd love to release myself from responding to negative reviews. That's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And Susan from Phoenix, I'd love to never have to pitch the media again. Agree with Jen, the grueling calls.
Great.
Mm-hmm. I think I got everybody in here so far.
I'm trying to think for me. It'd probably be social. Yeah, I struggle. I do it and I put a lot of heart into it, but I don't know. And it's good and I see the good things of it, but it doesn't generally give me a ton of energy. So, and the persistence of it, wears my mental energy down. But I would love if I had the magic wand, and it would continue from my mind into the ether of the without anything in between.
Yeah, I get you on social. But I think like I like the way we've set it up, where we're producing content, and then wait, Kat and Jen, how you repurpose it.
I was gonna say that's why you have us.
Exactly.
What are you guys talking about here?
Yeah, but
Oh, yeah, you do a wonderful job. I'm just saying my own personal social.
yeah, and I love that model. I love that model, and I think it goes back to the main reason people get in trouble with social, where it becomes such an energy drain, is they're not producing original content at the beginning. So they're trying to figure out what to say as they go. That's one pattern.
True. That's not true for me, but that's
not for you, but I'm saying in general, because how many times do we get someone that is on that goes, I just love doing social media, like an entrepreneur. It's like it's sort of like the wipe and dipe, as Rose Fast calls it, of marketing. It's just changing diapers and, you know, all of the newborn behaviors. So
doing
anyway,
the basics, I think, is what you're going after, right?
When
Doing the
basics involve poop, yes.
Yes. The poopy basics.
Poopy basics. There's the name of our next challenge circle.
Yes. Well, welcome to the Challenge Circle. Let's kick it off here. We're really pleased to have you. So we are Root and River, Kat, Jen, Emily, and Justin, and we're really pleased that you showed up. Today's session is a challenge circle, and this is something that we're going to do every other month moving forward for those who join our BeMa community, Being Marketers, which launches April 1st. And there are various levels of participation that you get to choose from. So there's toes in, hands in, and all in. And the challenge circles are part of the all in participation level. So if you like this format and if you enjoy the interaction, we would encourage you to join BeMa at toes in, get a little sample, and then think about joining us as well for all in. We'll hold these every other month. There'll be 90 minutes moving forward, and really it's an opportunity not just to mastermind, but to come in together and solve real brand and marketing problems that you're having with our team. So we're really excited about being able to have that level of interaction and hands-on with you and helping you get past hurdles that we all have. And that's really why we ask the question, right? Stopping you, what would you love to get rid of? Because we all run into barriers and we all run into blocks on certain things. And we, all four of us, love to help people get around those and through them and on to the next thing. So the format for today is really going to be very unformed. We're gonna first spend a little bit of time thinking about our biggest brand marketing challenge, and then hopefully you feel comfortable sharing those with us. And then this team is gonna kind of tackle them, look at them, turn them upside down, kind of let the light come in different ways and talk through several of them. And that's really what we want to save the majority of our time for today. So that being said, and then at the end, we will have a tool for you. I forgot to mention that. So it's toes in, hands in, and all in. At the hands in level, for BeMa, we are putting together a tool every month to help you make your brand more real. And so at the end of today's session, we will have our first ever tool for you, and we'll walk you through it briefly, and then we'll send that out to you. And it is related to helping you get unstuck with whatever thorny branding challenge you're facing. So that is to come. So hang on till the end of the webinar to get a chance to look at that. Okay, guys, what did I miss? Anything? Cool, let's go. So out there in the description of this webcast, but we'll ask you again, what is your thorniest branding or marketing challenge? And by thorny, like, it hurts. It hurts. It stops you from really engaging, something that is getting in your way. And we'd love for you to just share those struggles in the chat. Think it through, give yourself a minute to really share. And we're gonna chat as we see those coming up, and we're gonna kind of talk through some of our thoughts around that challenge. And if you feel moved to kind of explain further, we can have you explain a little bit further, unmute. But I want to share, while you're thinking about that, just one challenge that I had early on in my career as an entrepreneur. Like, I'm very kind of service oriented, other people oriented, giving oriented. So I always sort of put myself and my own presentation on the back burner. And the further I grew in my career, that became more and more of a challenge, but one I really didn't want to face because it would take away time from doing things for other people, essentially. And we run into this a lot with a lot of the entrepreneurs that we have the opportunity to work with. So it sort of came to a head. I had kind of a basic website up for the company that I had personally before Root and River. It was really kind of just very basic. And when Justin and I began working together, exploring the idea of starting Root and River, he told me very bluntly, as he can be, you need to get your brand up to code. And we were driving on a road, I think it was in Idaho, and I literally had like an Ally McBeal type moment where I saw myself opening up the car door and rolling out. Like I was so upset by this comment. I didn't jump out of the car. Instead, I just put an investment in myself and my own brand and really focused on doing for myself what I had started doing for others, articulating the brand and articulating who I am and what I believe in, putting it out there. So, but that took me years. That took me years to kind of overcome, but it was a big challenge for me. So that's an example of one challenge and a blunt reframing that was very effective and kind of pushing me past that. So if you have a current branding or marketing challenge, go ahead and drop that in the chat. Justin, what about you? What's something that's gotten in your way?
I think over my career so it's 18 years, and I think what has gotten in my way as it relates to marketing, so in those roles, I was the head of marketing for a company, then I was a CMO for a startup, and then I was my own stuff. That's when we met, doing my own thing. And I think the thorniest challenge that I had was I felt early on, I felt like I was right. Like my friend Tack Anderson, he's the CMO for Twitch now, or I think CMO or some executive for Twitch. He and I way back like 2005 were like, these are the trends. And I was like, I just knew we were right, but I had no data to support it. And I also really don't like feedback all that much. I tolerate feedback. So as the market went along and they kept asking the same, well, what's the target audience, ROI, blah, 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 blah. I just let it get to me. And it made me cynical. It made me cynical in the process of like, well, no one's ever going to do this. Now we've seen this huge breakthrough and around more, higher consciousness marketing practices and ethical branding. And we've seen this surge where when we go out now, you and I, and when we go out and we're talking to prospects, we don't get near the number of like, now what the hell are you people talking about? We don't get that nearly as much because I think there's this, but early on, man, it was the wild frontier of this stuff. And it was exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So was your challenge that you let it get to you? What was it exactly?
The challenge is that I think because I let it get to me. Yes, that is probably the deeper psychological therapeutic challenge. But from a marketing standpoint, I did not know that the market would be so initially resistant to these ideas.
Okay.
And that there was going to be a runway to uneducate the marketplace.
So how did I'm still confused on how this was like a challenge that you faced down. Keep going. Well,
because so that's the shift for me was this realization somewhere around 2000 and maybe 10 or 9. It's like, oh, I need to go out and lead these conversations. So I just amped up my speaking and I spoke. It reminds me of a funny clip. It's a TMZ clip of who's the side guy, Ryan from American Idol.
Ryan Seacrest.
Ryan Seacrest, yeah, where he's walking down the street and one of the paparazzi says, "Hey Ryan, what advice do you have for people trying to break into the entertainment business?" And he goes, "Say yes to everything." And he looks at his watch and goes, "And I got to get going. I got a bingo tournament to host." And so I started doing that, saying yes to everything. And yes to any opportunity I could have to have a conversation.
Gotcha.
And I guess I switched from being a condemner of current thinking, which is where I was trying to approach the marketplace. Like, you dumb people, this is not how it works anymore. And you know me, especially back then, like being sort of a lot of hyperbole, a lot of like over a lot of theatrics, and switched from that to a thought leader around something positive, which is around the time that our paths crossed. So
yeah, that's good. I also think too, it's like waiting for the market to come to you versus going out to the market. It's sort of essentially what you're saying.
yeah.
And that's a really common trap to fall into. Great. Well, I think we see some challenges coming in. Kat, you're on mute, my love.
I unmuted, I thought. Okay, here we go. The first one is from Anne. I've been too spread out, wanting to do too many things, and therefore not knowing how to choose and then market one thing. Truthfully, I have the talent for many, but it works against me, always wondering how to settle into maybe 2 niches.
Yes.
That's the first one.
I have an answer on that one, if I may. This is true, I think, for a lot of people that are generalists. It does work against you in a sense of focusing on something. Being a generalist is a great brand strategy, though. There's a great book around this called Range. Well, it's not a great book. It's an average book that's got a good point. And about having range and being a multi-tool. The main thing is I think where people get in trouble, I'm not saying this directly about you, Ann, but I'm saying as kind of a general concept is, marketing is a really ineffective way to solve an identity crisis. And that's what a lot of people do, especially people, boomer or Gen Xers and boomers. They're like, well, I'm going to go market until the market tells me who I am and what they need and da, 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 da. And when you do that, doubt creeps into everything, especially if it doesn't produce the desired result. That's why I think the root of any marketing strategy and brand strategy is you got to know who you are. You got to know that down at a spiritual core self, like deep level. And because that will inform your marketing, largely. So that's my take, Ann, on it's like organize around, like figure out who you are, not what you want to be in the world, but who you are and what gifts you have. We do this in root sessions in our brand sprints. What's your mission? What are your beliefs? What are your standards? That root system stuff will inform the marketing activity. The marketing activity does not inform the root system.
Yeah. A thought that comes to me as well is that Americans, we're just so fixed on linear thinking and like, what am I doing? And I like to turn this over and say that it can just be for right now. Like, you can just have that focus on 1 or 2 things for right now. We don't have to think of it. We don't have to get trapped in that fixed mindset of like, this is it, I'm locking in, this is what I'm doing from now to the end of time. It can be an approach of, I'm going to explore this and stay focused on this for the next 2 years or a year. And then I'm going to regroup and see where I'm at with it. And I'm going to shift based on what the audience has told me, what the market has told me, and also where my creative energy lies. And the tool we have later really taps into sort of some of this decision making and how to make it from an energetic standpoint. But I think that's important. I know for me, I have a lot of modalities and a lot of interests, and I've learned that focus is important, particularly when you're wanting to engage an audience, because they sort of have to know what they're coming in for. But I don't have to be so fixed and like, okay, this is it now, I'm doing this forever. It can be very iterative, and I can leave space within myself to say, all right, this is the focus, and it might shift in 2 years. So those would be my thoughts. It's just an invitation in to try to experiment with that sort of mindset.
Jen or Kat, any thoughts that come up for Anne on that one about being spread too thin?
Yeah, I'll chime in. Anytime I feel spread too thin, I try to focus on one priority and make that 80% of my focus. And then everything else is kind of like, okay, like I'm going to give a little bit of water to those seeds, but I'm going to focus most of my water on this one area, this one plant. So that's my strategy personally when feeling overwhelmed or feeling like, I'm trying to do everything at once, like kind of keep those other areas moving and chugging along, but pour your focus into one area.
Does that change for you? What your 80% is, Jen?
Yes, all the time.
Okay.
All the time. Yeah, it's always shifting.
That's good. I would say I use blocks of time because I can get very ADD with that kind of stuff, and then I'm not doing anything well. So I just try to for this block of time, I'm going to work on this and then move on to the next thing. I usually have 28 items that I want to work on, but I try to do one at a time. Let's see. We've got next one's from Mike. Jen, do you want to read this one or do you have it in front of you?
Sure. Yeah, I have it in front of me. This question is from Mike O'Krent. Hi, Mike. Mike says we have two business partners, or we two business partners and Mike are launching caregiver plan on May 1st. Thorny now, ? To prepare, we are now building an email list targeted to family caregivers for the launch. I want to do the best job doing it, but it's a pain in the tush to do. Oh man, the dreaded email building the email list. It's always rough, isn't it, Mike?
So I think one of the things about doing tasks that are not energy positive, but you still have to do is, for me, in my experience, is applying a lot of self-care while you're doing that. And Kat is really good about reminding all of us about this. So if I'm sitting down to dig into something that is tough, I hear her voice in my head and I try to make myself a drink before I start. This sounds super basic, but a lot of times I'm very hardworking and I'm very industrious. So I will just get into mode and not leave my desk and not drink anything. Sometimes I forget to breathe. So I will try to step back and be more mindful about how can I love on myself in this moment where I'm doing this hard thing. And so whatever that means for you, it means usually I stop for a cup of tea. I'm like, oh, this new album is out. I'm going to on while I work, or I've been meaning to listen to this podcast if it's something that I can work on and listen to something. Just set myself up to kind of love myself through it. That has been helpful for me. And also setting a time blocks are great, but also I'm going to spend the month of March working on this, and then I'm going to stop, and wherever I get to is okay, sort of a place. So it's not infinite in my mind and therefore overwhelming.
I would say similar to what Em said is this is more about mindset than anything. And part of that mindset is just accepting the suck. Like none of it's fun. It's like clear and brush. If you're going to live, I learned this hard lesson when I lived in Idaho. I lived on 3 acres, and I learned that you can, if you live out in the country and there's a lot of brush to clear and a lot of maintenance to do, you either need money to pay somebody else to do it or the skills to do it yourself. And I had neither. And marketing, like list building and some of those more tedious based, they feel like that. It feels like, holy hell, this is exhausting. So I love what Em said about self-care and the process, giving yourself, it's the Pomodoro method is another thing to look into, more sprint style. But I would look at the mindset of also every person that you're going to touch. This is not about promotion. This is about introducing an idea. And Mike, I know a little bit about what you're doing from our coffee visit a few weeks ago. So I have some inside baseball here, but I think this is true across the board, which is, remember, you're not really marketing, you're introducing yourself to people that need what you have. And, is that going to be a salve for all of the, ground and pound of this type of work that needs to be done? Not necessarily. it's not going to cure it. It's just going to give you a different perspective. The other thing is it's maybe if you're more face-to-face, or at least face-to-face on Zoom, is do maybe sprinkle in some outreach to people where you're not, you just want to, like, maybe do it as a survey where you're going to say, hey, we're launching this thing and we want to get your feedback. Would you be willing to jump on a 15-minute call and give me answers to 2 questions? And conversations, at least for me, the more conversations, the more meaningful conversations I'm having, the more energy I have to do the stuff that isn't all that fun.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to keep plugging along because we've got quite a few. Karen says we're really focusing on trying to highlight our differentiators, and it's been a bit difficult to identify those from the client perspective, but also to communicate those. I struggle with talking myself or radiant up. So sharing this message of we're so great for these reasons on our site has been challenging.
Yes. It's always difficult to get that objectivity, to know what makes you truly different. So I think it sometimes can be almost impossible because you're so in it and you're so close to it and you're surrounded and swimming in it every day. So what I always recommend is picking 2 or 3 of your most favorite people that are clients and calling them and discussing why. Some of the questions I love to use is like, why did you hire us? Where were you before we had this first interaction? Like what was going through your mind? What were you thinking? And then why did you choose us? And then what about the experience has stayed with you? What's been the most powerful? So you're not asking them what makes us different, because that I find too, it's like, I don't know if any of you are fans of Billy on the Street, but I love Billy on the Street. And sometimes back before COVID, he would run up to people and say, tell me the name of one actor, and he'd throw the mic in their face, and people couldn't say anything. So that's oftentimes how we pose questions to our audience, like, tell me what makes us different. And that can really cause somebody to freeze. So coming at it from the experience standpoint, asking them to share their experience of your brand, what you'll get in that answer many times are typically the things that really stand out, that are memorable, that make you different. So I think that's a good way to begin to get unstuck. We did this a few years ago with some of our offerings, and we suddenly realized that, what we thought was like the coolest thing, it was actually thing that we were not necessarily paying that much attention to. So it helped us shift processes, systems, and the way that we were presenting our differentiators to people.
Yeah, Karen, we have a rubric that we teach our clients around differentiation that might be helpful to you and those listening in. It's ODD, being odd. And the O stands for it's obvious. And in order to see something obvious, I think sometimes, like Emily said, you got to get some outside perspectives. One of the questions to ask someone that is looking at you externally, whether it's a client or a strategic partner, whatever, is what can we do better than anyone else you know? That's a great obvious differentiator, like if you know what that is. The second is it's got to be definitive. It can't have a lot of squish to it. Great service is not a differentiator, or leading edge technology, that's not a differentiator. So it's got to be definitive. It's got to have some density to it. And then the third one is it has to be daring. The very best brand strategy of all is heresy, is to go out and tell the truth about something and go out and be who you are in the marketplace. But it's an act of courage to do that. It's an act of courage to challenge norms, especially when you're in the professional services business. So the question is more introspective question is, what is the most daring thing, back to that ODD, what is the most daring thing I could say about my brand or our brand? And I always think back to this legendary story now of somebody asking, what's the ROI of brand? And Kat responding, what's the ROI of not being dead inside? And that's an example of being daring, of of speaking truth in the moment to the thing that other people may be too uncomfortable to say. Last thought on this is any sort of talking about, because you alluded to this about like talking about yourself or radiant, Karen, is courage trails action. You'll do it, then you'll start to feel courage. If you sit around and wait to feel courage to do it, it'll not happen. It's similar to maybe like having kids or launching a business or getting married or whatever. Like if you wait around for it to be 100% right and you're fully confident, it's probably not going to happen. So courage trails action.
Excellent. Jen, you want to read this? I think Samantha's is next.
Sure. Let me scroll up. Gosh, you guys have a lot of good ones. Samantha writes, our business is heavily referral driven, which is great, but we would like to diversify where leads come from. Figuring out where our ideal clients are, where it makes the most sense for them to hear from us is a challenge right now. What channel should we use and what should we avoid?
Great questions. And it's a really common challenge right now because everything has shifted in terms of what we're able to do from an outgoing standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think is a good strategy here is I mean, we always, our mantra is first go inward, right? So going inward to know what sort of new clients you want to serve is, I would say, the first step. So getting very clear on who you want to bring in, who you want to invite in. Maybe it's a more diverse clientele. Maybe you realize that that's an opportunity. Maybe you want to serve a certain type of like a mission-driven business, or maybe you really want to serve a female-led business. So I think clarity on that, you'd be really well served to get as clear as you can about what you want. Sometimes people think, oh, I just got to go out and see who responds. And we would say, no, first decide who you want to show up. And then secondly, I think this is where I always go to content first, kind of developing some content. If you can build some relationships with that ideal audience, and not necessarily in a specific sales mindset, but just if you get very clear on who you want, and then you're like, oh, I know this person, or maybe I could reach out to so-and-so, have those conversations, and then start maybe developing content that's tailored to that individual circumstance or context of what that audience facing. And from there, I think I would look for organizations that would allow me to maybe come in and share more of the content. If you put the content out there and there is a response, engaging people, I think LinkedIn is a good place to do this, depending on what your business is, where you can put out ideas, see who's responding, and then engage further in conversations. And then just in an analog style, people are starting to have more meetings like this one. And then they've done it in the last year, but they're going to continue now. So I think reaching out to local organizations and saying, hey, this is what I'm talking about. It's seeming to resonate with this group. Love to be able to come into a virtual gathering and share what I'm thinking. It is bold, but that can help you build those relationships with the audience that you'd really like to have as a part of your business.
Yeah, I guess I have a just a different angle. I agree with all that, but a little different angle, which is the first part of this, which is our business is heavily referral driven, which is great, but we would like to diversify where leads come from. I would question that strategy. I would question it in the sense of examine, well, why do you need to diversify? Because generally speaking, you want to double down on what's working for you. That you could be like, okay, if we do want to diversify leads, which means we're going to have to go buy leads, or we're going to have to buy advertising, or we have to do something to get into other channels. Or you could just tell your current believers, your current base, who you're looking for, and ask for introductions. You can goose the referral process. You can give it a little, give it a burst or a boost, excuse me, by being real specific about the kind of person. So one of the things that we teach our clients, and we do this ourselves, is we call it people like you. And people like you is a sincere form of flattery, which is you reach out to your customers, let's say, and you say, we love working with people like you because you have these 4 traits or 3 traits. We have a request. We want to work with more people like you. Who do you know that you can introduce us to? So it's the direct ask. And what we're tapping into here at a kind of meta level is the law of reciprocity, which is if you've served them, if they're believers in what you do, they like, they're fans, whatever, they're going to reciprocate, and you're going to see a bump in leads, or you'll start to see you'll notice that at least you're planting a seed in their mind that that referrals are intentional, not accidental. We often hear this from new clients where we ask about their current marketing activities, and they say, well, and they kind of apologize and be like, I guess just word of mouth. And we're like, great, let's do more of that. And this goes back to just organize around what's working, organize around your strengths, and question strategies that require you to learn a new skill on the fly, because that goes back to energy. And if you're busy trying to learn a new thing on the fly that doesn't match necessarily the strategy is already exhausting.
All right. Deanna just shares that I can hear Justin from a branding retreat saying market to eliminate those you do not want to work with. May not be an exact quote, but she remembers that. That's great. All right, Jennifer asks, challenges creating original topical content with frequency. I love designing, but I hate writing. So keeping an email, newsletter, or blog is too time consuming. So that's any advice on that?
Would you read that for me one more time?
Sure. It's creating original topical content with frequency is the challenge. I love designing, but I hate writing. So keeping an email, newsletter, or blog is too time consuming. This makes me think of a newsletter I'm getting right now. 2 newsletters actually that I've seen a flip where it's more visual than it is writing, which I love because I really don't like reading. I don't really like reading a giant newsletter. So I'm seeing that flip and I like it. Just something that came to mind, Jennifer, when I read yours.
I agree. I think this goes back to a theme that we see over and over again, which is do what gives you energy first. Sometimes we can't do what gives us energy all the time, but do it first. Mm-hmm. And to Kat's point, there's also, we live in the too much information age right now. And so there is a place for long form content. We're fans of long form content, but only if you like creating it. So it could be just a different medium. It could be using traction graphics of things that, nuggets, little pearls of wisdom done graphically with your logo. That works. That's good. That's content. That's consistent. It's topical. And then shooting short videos where you just, you talk about what your, whatever the topic is, and then maybe, then your newsletter is actually just a synthesis of recent recordings and graphics that you've created, put into a singular flow for a quick scan for people that missed it because of the, out on the socials. But I don't know that I don't think you should, let's put it this way. If you're over 30, and I don't know if you are, Jennifer, but I'd say this as a 50-year-old, if you're over 30, you should minimize the amount of stuff that you think you need to do because you hate doing it. You've earned the right to say no to the things that you hate doing. That's another way to say it. If you're under 30, please keep doing things you hate, because that's how you learn what you don't like.
What you like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say too, sort of in line with that, is to question the frequency. It doesn't have to be, make the frequency work for you. Choose the pace that works for you. If it's once a quarter, that's okay. If it's, once a month, that's okay too. There's a lot of imposed pressure to do things like that. And then also, and you may already be doing this, but something that I do so that I don't sit down and feel the pressure when I have to create something is just keeping a little list of sort of tickler ideas. that can be, they're not big ideas, but they could be fleshed out in just a few sentences. And then when I sit down to write, it's already like half written. And sometimes if I'm on a run or doing something, I'll just do a voice recording of the thought. If I don't capture it, it tends to leave me, and then it makes the production, whenever that is, at whatever frequency, a little bit easier.
Let's jump to Susan's question, Kat or Jen, because I think that is that's a common issue. And it's specific to PR for Susan, but I think this is a really common issue of shifting marketplace, and what used to work doesn't work anymore. Jen, you want to do that one?
Yes, I'm just trying to find it. I saw it when it came through. Kat, can you read it? Do you mind if you have it up? Thank you.
I hear two boys in the background, Jen, right? Yes. Okay. In more than 20 years of doing PR, I had always been able to garner earned media for my clients until recently. Between the major shifts to pay per play and the impact that has on true journalism, I've been shut out trying to secure media for one of my clients. They're in the real estate market. And since so many outlets have real estate advertisers who spend a lot of money, none of them will cover what I think is a legitimate news story.
Yeah. That kind of taps into that frustration we were talking about earlier about pitching. So I think my mind immediately goes to telling that story. And I know, they've hired you to get it out there, but sometimes you kind of have to show people the story in order for them to engage with it. Again, this may or may not be something that you want to offer, but creating a space where you get to tell the client's story in a very public way, whether that's on your blog, your website, whether that's encouraging them, like working with them to refine the story in a really evocative way, and then walking them through producing a piece of content that is them telling the story, and whether that's on like a video on social, a live, it could even be a series of informative webcasts or that kind of a thing. We have this wonderful opportunity, even though the pay to play market is really taking over, and there's so much competition there for news content. There's also this opportunity for you to be the news producer and maker and to garner attention that way, particularly when so many people get their news from various sources and the ones that they like. So I guess that's where my mind goes. And yeah, kind of building the conversation that you want to own or that your client wants to own from the ground up. And that will give you more, or them more possession of that moving forward. They can even obviously do this on their website, but working with you to develop the story.
Yeah, I can add to that too. Those are good tips. And, from a PR perspective, I'm going to kind of share something that we tell our clients all the time from a story perspective. Like, the story should never start with you. You as a main character should kind of be like, your client should be the main character, or somebody else should be the main character, and your brand should kind of be in that supporting role. So I think it kind of applies for PR too. And I know, Susan, you're a brilliant PR person and you've thought of all of this, but what stories can you lead with the humans and lead with like the storytelling, or lead with some of those more human aspects? And then the real estate brand is kind of that supporting role. Oh, by the way, this was made possible because of, this new, real estate development that went in this small city or whatnot. So I think it's a good tip for anyone who's doing storytelling, that sometimes we think we have to lead with our brand. We have to lead with our side of the story, and shifting that a little bit and leading with the human that's benefiting from your brand, telling their story first, and then coming in as kind of that supporting character. And I think that that can help with PR and PR and pitching, but it can also help anytime you're telling a story about your brand. Just makes it a little bit more compelling.
I think there's a larger thing here too with this is the market is market fragmentation. I'm going to say something mildly offensive, which is there are only two predictable demographics, and that's elderly people and Trump supporters. They're the only like large pool of people that behave very similarly with their decisions. And so this idea of demographics as a subset of who you're going to go talk to is become dated, and it's still good to know that, but it's not really a decision tool anymore. What I recommend in this particular area is if you have these shifting demographics, if your market is fragmented, which is kind of the overarching issue that Susan is talking about, if you have a fragmented market, is go micro. And this may sound silly, but there's things like community newsletters. Everybody picks those community newsletters up, and if there's a little story in there, there's a scan. Church newsletters or church bulletins, other people's email lists that you can coattail, community events. It's hard to do that with COVID, but as things start to shift, get micro. Think smaller, more dense, around a much more defined community, and you're going to create then your own. It'll have its own natural echo chamber that will get greater results than trying to go trying to go higher than that. So trying to go big,
I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll flip into the tool. One or two for sure ones.
Yeah, I saw one in here that I thought would be, let's see, our next one. How do you choose the one seed to focus on the most that aligns with your roots?
Yeah, that's actually a really great lead-in for the tool. So I mean, we always go to energy. We always go to, that's why we do the work that we do, is when you are aligned with who you are and what you believe, and then how you want to live that out, or your standards for yourself, and then how the mission that you're trying to accomplish in the greater world, and then how you want to share that. If all of those things are in alignment, it makes the decision process of what to water very almost non-existent, because it's obvious where to focus your energy to achieve that mission, to live those beliefs out. And so I think, again, it's always go inward. I think it's around understanding what that root system is and focusing there. And that isn't always, I mean, we all have realities of business and making money and supporting ourselves and our families. So that obviously needs to come into play. But beginning with that base, because if you're not aligned there and you start with like the end result of where you want to be, or like what you should do, what feels expected of you, it's just a sort of a super highway to being disgruntled, in my opinion, and disappointed. And you won't have that continued sustained energy to do what you do and to build what you want to build. So yeah, and then I think the tool will also help with some decision making and priority setting. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would add, if you focus on your mission, of sharing your mission in the form of story primarily, one of the things I've learned from Jen is that there's always energy for story when it's an actual story. It's because it's so primitive and deeply embedded in us, a great story. So, and if the story is about the mission, and I think, Denise, of what you guys are doing with Americana Foods, that's always a good starting point. It's always a good thing to talk about the change you're trying to make in the world. There's also some delineation. How do you say that word?
Delineation.
Yeah, that between what kind of brand you are. So are you a philosophy brand, which means are you going out and trying to share a new idea with the world? Are you a movement brand? You're trying to create some sort of change. Are you a methodology brand? You got a new kind of system, or are you a commodity brand, which we hope no one is that, but you know, sometimes that's what it is. I think that if you're, especially if you're a movement brand or you're a philosophy brand, talking about the movement you're trying to create in the world or the change you're trying to make, or talking about your philosophy is always, always going to give you energy and always going to be a source of like an eternal spring of insight and information and inspiration as you go out and as you start to create marketing activities. I never get tired of talking about the spiritual side of branding in any format. I could have a raging migraine and not slept for 48 hours, and I could still talk about the spiritual side of branding because that's most aligned with the roots of why I'm doing this.
Awesome. All right. Cool. Okay. Well, I think we will save the chat for sure for anything that we didn't get to, and maybe you'll see those themes popping up in blog posts and whatnot. But certainly everything, the conversations we want to have inside of BeMa, being marketers, are just like this. And so we're excited if you choose to join us that these are the kind of things that we can kick around as a community together. There's so many amazing people on this call that we know we have the opportunity to work with or know, and others we don't know. And together our ability to kind of crack these problems and push each other past these obstacles is really powerful. That's really what we want to tap into in BeMa. But I heard a common theme, which I was honestly like, we plan these things and you never know how things are going to turn out. But we put together this tool around decision making, and I just need to, I think, Justin, you need to enable my screen share.
Okay. That's weird. Coming right up.
Yeah, it sounds like hopefully this is helpful for you. But it goes to how we put our time and resources, where we apply our time and resources, and where do we decide, and being very practical. You know, it's tough out there right now. And so energy is more limited, in my opinion, than it was before we experienced this pandemic. And so we want to be able to have, are you guys just seeing a black screen? I'm just seeing a black screen right now. Yeah. We want to be able to have some criteria that we can go to make decisions. Let's try again one more time. Based on both the realities and based on that spiritual alignment. Let's see, second time's a charm. Maybe not. Just switch. Huh. This is the first time this has ever happened. Try it one more time. Nope. All right, this doesn't work. Plugging it in. Trying again. All right. Okay. So our tool is around how to set energetic priorities. So again, our energy is finite, and there are certain things, as we've talked about, as Mike brought up, that bring us energy, and there are certain things that drain our energy. So we put together this tool as a bit of we like to have filters or rubrics that help kind of get us a little more objective about where we're spending our time and energy. And so basically what we would invite you to do, and again, we'll send this out later, but is to identify either 3 projects or considered projects that you're thinking about launching, or ongoing initiatives that you have that you find maybe are bouncing up and down on your priority list, or can't seem to find a toehold on your priority list. And the first thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and like just make a little note about what that is. Let's say, for us at Root and River, we've got a book that we've been kicking back and forth and making progress on and stalling out on. So I just like go ahead and put that one up there as an example, and just list those out and think about those projects. Then take your first project and number 1, consider the direct impact. So that means really, if this gets done right, if this project gets done right, what is the impact that this will have on our business? And then just go ahead and like give it a ranking for how much of an impact that it would have. So for us, I think this would obviously have a big impact. We've written 1 book. We definitely need to write a second book about, what we do and who we are. So I'd put this like a 10. So then you want to move on to consider good revenue. So how directly does this project bring in needed and wanted revenue? Because we live in the real world and we need revenue. And we can chase revenue that's not good revenue. We can go down rabbit holes of having revenue that we don't want to have. So how directly does the book project bring in needed and wanted revenue? It within itself, selling a book, it's not going to bring in a ton of revenue. However, it is recurring revenue, and it kind of goes on forever. But the exposure that we get by having a book presents lots of opportunities for new clients and new work. So I don't know. What do you think, Justin? Like an 8? 9?
Yeah, I think it depends though on the time. I think that I would put it down more because of the long tail of a book. I would put it more down like at a 6.
Okay.
I think that number goes up over time.
Mm-hmm.
But we're, like you said, we're operating within the real world of a time constraint. So I would say like over a year, the first year after the book is out, it's probably a 6, but I think the number can go up as the book organically grows.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like our podcast strategy. It's like initially we didn't, now we're starting to get leads and conversations from that, but that took a while to produce that kind of result.
Yes. And then moving on, it's consider the right resources. Do you have the resources and buy-in to do this well? So being really honest with yourself as far as, are we going to have to invest more in order to get this done properly? And kind of gauging that. For us, the resource challenge here is time. So we don't have a ton of time. So that's a challenge. And we just have to be really honest about how we want to tackle that challenge in the discussion of whether or not, of the resources for this project. So I guess we do, as long as we dedicate the time, but and I know if we do it, it will be done well. So I guess, I don't know, I'm kind of like what do you think? Like a 7 or 8?
Yeah, 6,
Okay,
7 or 8, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then just as an example. And then finally, consider support systems. Can I get support to get me past the difficult portions or the sticky parts? I think this is something that people miss a lot, right? We don't think about how we're going to run into problems. One business speaker I was listening to recently, he was coaching somebody who said like, oh, this thing I'm starting, it's going to be super successful. And he said, I never had an entrepreneur tell me that they're going to be a super failure within 2 years. Like people always, you think, oh, this will go great. So we don't pause often to consider that we're going to need support. We're going to run into difficulties and it's not all going to go to plan. So can you get support to get you past the difficult portions? For us, yeah, I think we could we can do that. And in the case of a book, that means more investment sometimes. like with working with a publisher or kind of as you get closer to marketing the book. So I'm thinking about that as I'm considering what number I could give. So let's say that's an 8 as well. And so then all you do is tally the scores, and 26 plus 6 is what, 34? If I did math right, I might not have. And then if you have competing projects, you can tally for each one and just sort of see where your scores end up. The higher the score, the more impact this project is likely to have on your brand and your business. And therefore, as Jen was saying earlier, maybe this is the thing you spend 80% of your time on. So that's how to use the tool. And then at the end, you can mark in write in your top priority. Any questions on that or comments?
Well, mostly because it will bug me, but I think the math is 32.
22.
Thank
32.
you.
I saw your message, Kat.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Math on the fly is hard, but
Oh, no, yeah, math is always a
Um,
challenge for me. Always have my calculator handy.
I think one of the main benefits of using a tool like this is it puts you in the observer seat or the witness seat. You're not. It's so easy to get bogged down in where you're everything is about the work that needs to be done, and pausing and stepping back. And we're utilizing in this tool left and right brain ideas, and it gives you that elusive clarity sometimes that can be muddy, where our vision of things can be so muddy because we're so close to it. So I think that's a very helpful. It's almost like a almost like a mindfulness tool, the way it's designed.
And more than one time I found myself down a rabbit hole on a project that really had low scores all the way around. And those are the times where you're like, okay, you need to reorient. But without a tool like this, it's hard to get that objectivity on it.
Yeah.
So I know we're at time. Want to be respectful of your time. Any last comments? We're really thankful that you joined us. We'll be sending out the recording to everybody that attended, and we'll be sending out that tool as well. And if you are interested in joining Being Marketers or being on our waiting list, we just would invite you to go to rootandriver.com, click on Being Marketers. P.S. we have a brand new website. We just launched it. And you'll get to read a lot more about the community, and you can even sign us there. Again, we're going to launch that on April 1st. And it is a community for ethical marketers and branders who really want to change the world with their brands. So we invite you all into it, and we hope to see you there.
Awesome. Thanks for the great challenges. You never know, we intentionally didn't do it in advance. And so you never know, but they were great. They were great questions. There was a lot of diversity there. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing those challenges. That can be difficult too. And when you think as you continue to think about the challenges, you can always reach out to us via email or on social, and we're happy to give you a little reminder, a kick in the ass, whatever you need because we get all this clarity and excitement from doing a discussion like this. Then we can go back out into the grind. So if you need a little encouragement now and again, just reach out to us on social, tweet us or Instagram, or just send us an email.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your week.